good point. Hello, everybody. So what we currently do is we do that in bullet points, as does engineering, right? Here's incrementally how we're going to build this out. And so for design, it would be, here's how we're going to incrementally validate or design this so that it can continue down the flow, like planning breakdown and things like that. I currently don't know how to use the iterations feature, even if it's possible to use it in a way where design could work an iteration or two ahead. And the reason why it's difficult to imagine how is because iterations are currently, well, they're currently at the GitLab org level. So having like separate iteration track for design work seems kind of difficult to do because of that. There isn't a way to say, okay, here's the plan UX group iterations, and we're using issues from the plan project, right, to articulate that. Can't do that right now, I don't think. Another thing that makes it difficult is we can't filter iteration view by labels. And I think it's possible that I want to filter the iteration view by labels because we can't use iterations at a subgroup level, right? So, and again, the outcome I want is like to have iterations that are more validation and design focused, that are kind of a separate track from the delivery focus of those issues, because those issues end up becoming a different type of issue further down the product flow. Does any of that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
There are lots of nuances to unpack there. In terms of the iteration reporting view itself, there's ways that we can solve that. And we have designs already done for grouping issues by label, which is just, it's on our roadmap, it's upcoming. To solve the immediate pain point that you mentioned, the smallest thing that I can think of would be exposing the ability to create lists of iterations on boards. So that way you could have the next few iterations as lists, and you could scope the board to like group project management or an entire stage. And then the UXers could work with the PMs on more or less breaking down those bigger epics and sequencing them across iterations, which is actually one of the core like jobs to be done that we have in the plan stage. Is how do you take an epic and break it down into like, you know, smaller sequenceable iterations, which is a common thing to do. That would be the smallest, lowest hanging fruit.
And that is development time, right? That's, we would need to make some designs for that, get some planning breakdown to happen, get some estimation around the issues to make that feature work, because we currently don't have that on boards. Am I right?
We have the designs done, or at like a 95% state. Holly and Alexis were pairing on that, and then we would need to get estimates from engineering for sure, and like have those issues. But they're on the imminent roadmap anyways, because people won't adopt iterations. Our customers won't until we have them integrated into boards. So.
Okay. And that's not low hanging fruit, I'm assuming, so to speak.
It's lower hanging fruit, I think, than some of the other things, because it's not really introducing any new UX pattern that doesn't previously exist. We're not, other than whatever refactoring we're currently doing for boards for Epic swim lanes, we're not adding any, I guess I would say, net new logic that's would require a lot of engineering time.
You by chance have the issue with the designs handy, Gabe?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that should then be one of the implemented improvements that we try to take on for iterations. Because it sounds like this is this is kind of table stakes for actually using iterations, or actually dogfooding iterations.
Yep. I'm sorry, I'm finding the deep link. We haven't put the designs into the header yet because we're waiting for final input, but here's the. I put it in that. Mike, do you think that if you were able to have a list of the future, like a list for each future iteration, it wouldn't be like UX getting their own iteration, but they'll be able to work ahead of future iterations and like work with product to sequence things into those future iterations?
That does seem it would work. Yeah.
A follow on to that would also be helpful and is a customer request is adding reviewers to issues. So where you could almost like have a UX review and the UX DRI would be sort of like a merge request approval roles type thing. But adding that to issues as well, which is a customer request. And I've talked to Daniel Cruz a little bit about that. So I think like if you could have a role of a UX sign off on an issue or approval, then you put the issue in some future iteration. UXer, when they're done with it, they can sign off on it, which means it's ready to go. If not, it would get kicked off into a future iteration.
Does seem workable. Yeah.
So what does development in total think about 3? Or is there any other number that we can put on the table?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, we've identified, like, it sounds like this, one we just talked about is sort of like maybe table stakes for using iterations more broadly and is, I think, a pretty large iteration on iterations. Like maybe the lowest hanging fruit, but still a watermelon sized fruit rather than an apple or something. So Gabe, are there like, I mean, there's like, I guess my question is like, would we count like small bug fixes or, like what is the like scope of that kind of warrants success? Like there's certainly, I think small improvements that could be made to like the iterations report and things like that, that would be smaller than this. But if it's to the point where we can't really use them without doing some of these bigger things, then I don't know how we reconcile that. Like, do we want to do one big thing and like consider that to be success, or do 3 small things that might not make things more usable?
I think going back to the original purpose, the desired outcomes, it's dog fooding so that we can decrease cycle time. And we believe that iterations will help us do that working in smaller batches. And so I don't, that we can say the number of improvements. I don't really care how we classify that. I'll leave that up to engineering. The goal is like, can we use it and does it help us decrease cycle time? Right. And if it doesn't, then why would we recommend it to our customers? That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering then if on the wording for the KR, if we should kind of move from implemented improvements to defined improvements, and maybe we can increase that number from 3 to 5. Just to Jake's point, we're at, we only have a month and a half or so. And just the thought of implementing a watermelon-sized fruit like that one, like I don't know how much, if we could realistically do that and 2 other improvements with the other things we have planned for 13.5 and 13.6.
Yeah,
Also
we can't.
on
Sorry, go ahead, John. No,
I was just going to say on the wording of the KR as well, they technically wouldn't be improvements that were discovered while dog fooding because they're all, they all come from customers. So we kind of know them in advance. So it also feels like a shortcut as well.
That's why I suggested also like a funnel so that we say, as we have not one KR for everyone in this working group, but rather have one for engineering, which simply says at the end of the funnel, we try to improve and get 3 improvements implemented at the end, that we try to get more stuff into the funnel. And I'm totally with John right now. It sounds rather like we get the dog food already from Amazon and basically try to feed it to the dog rather than figuring out what the dog wants. The question is if we can also define more KRs at the top of it, of saying, okay, we dog food, and during that process, we define 10 issues and 3 we get implemented. So we have 2 different KRs, or if we get ready for development 5, that's totally up to EMs, PMs, and UX managers telling me what the numbers is. But I think just having one that simply says, okay, let's get 3 things implemented that we already know is not really the essence of dog fooding in my perspective. What do you think?
I agree with that too. The biggest challenge that I face is planning that our customers is being async first. And how do you have async iteration planning sessions that don't span, 3 to 4 days? Largely because iteration is only a week long. So like you don't want to have in traditional synchronous meetings, you would have a 30 minutes to an hour where you look at a board together and you like weight things and you move things into the next iteration or whatever. We can't do that at GitLab. So how should we solve for that process? That's something that would be interesting to figure out how to Dogfood that I don't have a solution for. And I'm also fine with just specifying ready for development to a certain degree, because I don't know how many of these we can even schedule in 13.5 given our other OKRs and performance goals and pajamas migrations and, like just too many competing priorities.
Yeah, so what if instead of focusing on like improvements to iterations, the feature, we focus on the dog fooding aspect? So something like, that would be aspirational, but 100% of issues that go into 13.5 or 13.6 have an iteration tied to it, or we determine what our iteration velocity is by the, I don't know, are we in iteration 6, I think, right now? By like iteration 10. And maybe we could do that earlier, and then we can also define another KR to be implement something determined from one of the earlier KRs.
I like that. That's along the lines of what I think all the plan PMs were proposing for the product department KRs. It's basically like adopt it, start using it. We have 5 iterations left before the end of the quarter. So start using it. Measure our throughput or velocity, and then ideally come out with prioritized set of improvements.
Sounds like a good KR for product. Then I'm coming back to development. Let's simply say, okay, we enable that part and make this as a KR so that we have something. I think it would be very hard to keep to one KR for everyone, but simply that Justin, you go ahead and define that KR for product, and we go ahead and define basically the KR, especially around the one thing that seems to be like the door opener to really using it, that we basically implement it and get it implemented there. Does that make sense?
It sounds like UX could also dog food if we made some iterations in the current iteration list, made some iterations that are like out ahead, right? What I was concerned about doing that was like if they would confuse people, if there's like these iterations into the future, but we can't really, the only way we know what the current iteration is if we match it to like the current date or the current week. Do you think that would work if, Gabe, if we generated like, maybe like 2 months worth of future iterations or something like that? You're muted.
Yeah, that would work. It'll be super painful to like manage that.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, like getting issues added to it and stuff like that. But yes, it's possible.
The dog food does not taste good.
Tim, were you saying that we on dev we should have a different KR than using the like what? So, and you were suggesting that we set that around implementing this boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Gabe. Like, is this like integrate iterations into boards? I think 13.5 is probably pretty full, but like, would we do that in 13.6? Is that kind of the top priority?
Yep, I think so.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how you feel. Like, I'm a little scared of it, but only because I don't know the full scope of it. But how do you feel about?
Yes, I'm scared of it also.
Is this a? Sorry, go ahead, Donald.
Justin.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I was
go
just going to ask if this is
No.
an example of product prioritizes like an investigation issue in 13.6 to start the work. Like we don't commit to shipping it in 13.6 if we're scared of it now, and we commit to a POC or something like that in 13.6.
If we work in good iterations, we anyhow can at least ship what we get done until the end, and that's all the target of the OKR. So I think, yeah, dog fooding is painful, scary, and all the other things at the same time. So yeah, I would rather say let's target getting it in than trying to drive an OKR that's simply around the POC so that we could hit, but rather get not something valuable into the product at the same time. And perhaps along those lines, we are able to cut it into smaller pieces so that we get 80% delivered anyhow. So
Yeah, so I mean, oh, sorry for cutting you off, Tim. My main fear with this is on the unknown, and just looking through like what we have planned for 13.5. It's fairly, and then also what we still have left in 13.4. Like unless we drop everything, and this is the #1 priority for 13.6. Yeah, my fear is just without doing that, we're not going to be able to complete it in 13.6. But on the other side, like if we can dog food this this epic or this issue and start thinking through how we want to break it down into iterations, like right now, so we can even start working on it in 13.5. I think that would be a great use case of dog fooding. So I think it'll be aspirational if we define the KR as fully implementing this feature by 13.6. But again, I think that's okay. Like this is not a binary KR where it's either 1 finished or 0 not finished. So yeah, I'm okay with committing to this as a KR.
Gabe, I want to ask you, do you feel comfortable with that from a prioritization perspective? Because it's sort of, we're making a global decision here as a group to prioritize something, and you're the DRI for prioritization for the project management group. So I want to make sure you're comfortable with this, given all the other priorities and things. You don't have to answer now also. You can come back to us later.
No, I'm not comfortable. Largely because I want to support my engineering and UX OKRs as well, which require a large portion of time and engineering time, basically. So in the perfect world, if we had unlimited resources, absolutely okay with prioritizing this if I knew that those other things wouldn't slip. So this goes up to management, which would you prioritize as leadership in the company? You know, is performance more important than dog fooding OKRs or iterations? That's where I struggle, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, my broader concern here is that you mentioned earlier, Gabe, we have performance improvements we haven't yet started on. Sorry if I'm misspeaking there. And then pajamas components to implement that I also don't think we've started yet. And then a bunch of work, like Donald was saying earlier, that's currently scheduled. We're working on prioritizing and cleaning up, and then likely some carryover from 13.4 as well. So going to 13.6, like again, if we stopped everything, but I don't know if that's the right decision to ignore the other 2 OKRs that we've committed to focus on this. But
throwing in a little bit of creative reorganization around the topic of, okay, we are looking at performance tasks and pajamas tasks, etc. that could also be done by other teams or other groups if we would be able to organize some bandwidth internally overall in the whole plan stage. So that would be something. We have two backend teams, might this be helpful, or might it be, is it more on the front end side? Then I can also take a look if we have some other areas that have a little bit of bandwidth that I could ask for, a little bit of an, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, well, of course, nothing's uncomplicated when we're facing this scenario. So the concern I would have with that is, especially on the portfolio certify, since we are sharing resources, is that we are either moving category maturity MVCs forward on the certify side. I don't know if Mark's on. I can't see. You can talk to that. But on the other side, you know, in portfolio management, we're trying to close feature gaps that directly tie to a large amount of IACV between now and next year. And so, again, like Gabe was saying, this gets into a conversation where we have competing priorities that have all been put into place at the same time. And now we're in a situation where we have to basically say, like, hey, which one do we care about the most as a company? And we get varying answers to that sometimes. And so it's difficult. But I would be very concerned to start pulling back-end work from portfolio management certified projects right now because of the IACV involved.
You know, stepping back, is there a reason why we couldn't say for this quarter, for this OKR, it's about adoption? Like we just start using, we're not using iterations now, we just start using them. And then in a follow-on quarter, so Q4 is more about prioritization of improvements based on the findings we have. And granted, we know, clearly we've talked about it, we know some of the obvious ones that we need to work on that we could consider prioritizing in Q4, but what about sequencing it that way? It just feels like there's going to be a lot of tension and a lot of pressure and a lot of stress added if we try and commit to prioritizing something now, where I think we can get some benefit and value in 5 iterations and a clear understanding of what we should prioritize in the sequence of those things, and then just commit to that Q4.
I think we need to leave. We can talk about this some more, but
Yeah.
That just puts ICV back, or more or less new customers in my MAU metrics increasing, since this is the stuff I need to do anyways for that. So it's like it's a no-win situation, I feel like.
Sure. I can write a proposal in the notes doc and we can talk about it next week.
Cool. Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone. Take care.
Everyone.